Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Fluent English Power. I'm so glad you're here today because we're going to tackle something that will instantly make your English sound more natural and fluent. Today's topic is all about how to connect sentences properly. If you've ever felt like your English sounds choppy or disconnected, like you're just putting one sentence after another without any flow, then this video is exactly what you need. By the end of this lesson, you'll know exactly how to link your ideas smoothly and speak like a native English speaker. Let me start by asking you a question. Have you ever been speaking in English and felt like something was missing? Maybe you know all the right words and your grammar is correct, but somehow your speech doesn't sound quite right. The problem is usually not about vocabulary or grammar. The real issue is that you're not connecting your sentences properly. When native speakers talk, they don't just say separate sentences one after another. They link their ideas together using specific words and phrases that create a smooth flow from one thought to the next. This is what we call sentence connectors or linking words, and they're absolutely essential for fluent English. Think about it like this. Imagine you're building a house. You have all the bricks you need, and each brick is perfect. But if you just stack the bricks on top of each other without any cement or mortar to hold them together, what happens? The house falls apart, right? The same thing happens with your English. Your sentences are like bricks, and the connectors are like the cement that holds everything together. Without them, your speech falls apart and sounds unnatural. But when you use connectors properly, everything flows beautifully and your message becomes clear and powerful. Now, let me explain the different types of connectors and how to use them. The first and most basic type is what we call sequential connectors. These are words that help you put things in order or show the sequence of events. The most common ones are first, second, third, then, next, after that, and finally. Let me give you an example of how these work in real conversation. Imagine someone asks you how to make coffee. You could say, first, you boil the water. Then, you put coffee grounds in the filter. Next, you pour the hot water over the grounds. After that, you wait a few minutes for it to brew. Finally, you pour it into your cup and enjoy. Can you hear how smooth and logical that sounds? That's because we're using sequential connectors to guide the listener through each step. The second type of connector is what we call addition connectors. These help you add more information to what you've already said. The most useful ones are also, and, furthermore, moreover, in addition, and besides. Let me show you how powerful these are. Instead of saying, I like coffee, I like tea, which sounds very basic and repetitive, you can say, I like coffee, and I also like tea. Even better, you could say, I like coffee. Moreover, I enjoy trying different types of tea from around the world. Can you see the difference? The second version sounds much more sophisticated and natural. These connectors help you build on your ideas instead of just listing them separately. Now, let's talk about contrast connectors. These are incredibly important because they help you show differences or opposites between ideas. The main ones you need to know are but, however, although, even though, on the other hand, nevertheless, and yet. Here's a simple example. Instead of saying, I love pizza, I don't eat it often, you should say, I love pizza, but I don't eat it often. Or you could say, although I love pizza, I don't eat it often because I'm trying to eat healthier. Notice how these connectors immediately show the relationship between the two ideas. They tell your listener that there's a contrast or contradiction, which makes your meaning crystal clear. Another really useful type is cause and effect connectors. These show why something happens or what the result of something is. The most common ones are because, so, therefore, as a result, consequently, and that's why. Let me give you a practical example. Instead of saying, "It was raining, I stayed home," you would say, "It was raining, so I stayed home," or "I stayed home because it was raining." You could also say, "It was raining heavily. As a result, I decided to stay home and watch movies all day." These connectors make the logical relationship between the two events completely clear. Your listener immediately understands why you made your decision. Now, I want to teach you about time connectors because these are essential for telling stories and talking about your experiences. These include while, when, before, after, until, as soon as, and during. Here's how you can use them effectively. Instead of saying, "I was studying, my friend called me," you should say, "While I was studying, my friend called me," or "I was studying when my friend called me." You could also say, "I had just finished studying when my friend called me to invite me out." Do you see how these connectors paint a much clearer picture of exactly when things happened? They help your listener understand the timeline of events perfectly. Let me also introduce you to example connectors. These are perfect when you want to illustrate your point with specific examples. The main ones are, for instance, such as like and to illustrate. Here's how to use them in real situations. Instead of just saying, "I enjoy outdoor activities," you can say, "I enjoy outdoor activities," for example, hiking, cycling, and kayaking. Or you could say, "I love trying different cuisines." For instance, "Last week I tried Ethiopian food for the first time and it was absolutely delicious." These connectors make your speech much more interesting and convincing because you're supporting your statements with real examples. Another important category is emphasis connectors. These help you stress the most important points in what you're saying. The key ones are actually, in fact, indeed, really, especially, and particularly. Let me show you how powerful these can be. Instead of saying, "Learning English is important," you can say, "Learning English is actually one of the most valuable skills you can develop in today's world." Or you might say, "I enjoy all types of music, but I'm particularly passionate about jazz." These connectors help you highlight what matters most in your message, which keeps your listener engaged and helps them remember the key points. Now, I want to talk about clarification connectors because these are super helpful when you want to make sure your meaning is perfectly clear. These include, in other words, that is to say, to put it simply, and what I'm trying to say is, for example, you might say, "The presentation was verbose." In other words, it was too long and used too many complicated words. Or, "I'm feeling quite peckish." I'm a bit hungry and could use a snack. These connectors give you a chance to rephrase your ideas in a clearer or simpler way, which is especially useful when you're explaining complex topics. Let me also mention opinion connectors, which are essential when you want to share your thoughts and beliefs. These include, "In my opinion," "I believe," "I think," "From my perspective," and "It seems to me that." For instance, you could say, "In my opinion, learning a new language opens up so many opportunities in life." Or, "I believe that consistent practice is more important than natural talent when it comes to language learning." These connectors make it clear that You're expressing your personal viewpoint, which is important in discussions and debates. Now, here's something really important that many intermediate learners don't realize. You shouldn't use the same connectors over and over again. If you always use and, but, your English will sound repetitive and boring. Native speakers use a variety of connectors to keep their speech interesting and dynamic. So instead of always saying and, try using furthermore, moreover, additionally, or also. Instead of always saying but, mix it up with however, nevertheless, on the other hand, or yet. This variety will make your English sound much more advanced and sophisticated. I also want to give you a practical tip about placement. Most connectors can go at the beginning of a sentence, but some sound more natural in the middle or at the end. For example, you can say, however, I disagree with that point, or I disagree with that point, however. Both are correct, but the first one is more common and sounds slightly more formal. You can say, I like coffee. Also, I enjoy tea, or I like coffee. I also enjoy tea. Again, both work, but the second one flows more naturally in casual conversation. Pay attention to how native speakers use these connectors and try to copy their patterns. Here's another crucial point. When you use connectors at the beginning of a sentence, you usually need to put a comma after them. For example, first, let me explain the basics. Then, we'll move on to more advanced concepts. Finally, we'll practice together. That comma gives your listener a tiny pause to process what you're saying, which makes everything clearer. However, when the connector is in the middle of the sentence, the comma rules can be different. For instance, I wanted to go to the party, but I was too tired, needs a comma before but. These little details might seem small, but they make a big difference in how professional and polished your English sounds. Let me give you one complete example that uses multiple types of connectors so you can see how they all work together. I've always wanted to learn guitar. First, I did some research online to find the best beginner guitar. Then, I bought one and started taking lessons. However, I quickly realized that learning an instrument requires a lot of patience. Although I practiced every day, progress was slow at first. Nevertheless, I didn't give up because I was passionate about music. As a result, after 6 months of consistent practice, I could finally play my favorite songs. In fact, I even started writing my own music. Therefore, I would encourage anyone who wants to learn an instrument to stay committed, even when it feels difficult. Can you hear how natural and flowing that sounds? That's the power of using connectors effectively. Now, let me share my final tips with you. First, start by mastering just a few connectors in each category. Don't try to learn them all at once. Pick maybe 3 or 4 that you'll use this week, and practice using them in your daily conversations. Second, pay attention when you're watching English movies or listening to podcasts. Notice which connectors native speakers use and how they use them. This will help you develop a natural feel for these words. Third, practice writing sentences and short paragraphs using different connectors. Writing is a great way to internalize these patterns before you use them in speaking. Remember, the goal is not to use as many connectors as possible. The goal is to use them naturally and appropriately to make your meaning clear. Sometimes a simple sentence without any connectors is perfectly fine. But when you have multiple ideas that relate to each other, that's when connectors become essential. They're the tools that transform your English from basic to fluent, from choppy to smooth, from confusing to crystal clear. I hope this lesson has been helpful for you today. If you practice using these connectors regularly, I promise you'll notice a huge improvement in how natural and fluent your English sounds. Thank you so much for watching Fluent English Power. If you found this video useful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more lessons like this. Leave a comment below and tell me which connectors you find most challenging or which ones you use most often. I love hearing from you. Until next time, keep practicing, keep improving, and keep building your English power.